Hello, on this video, I'm going to talk about the if-else statement from C#. So before we write some code, let's take a look on these comparison operators and also logical operators. So I'm not going to go over all of them because of time, but let's go over the equal at least. So the equal operator is made out of two equal signs. So this comes between two values. There'll be one value here and one value here. And in order for this to be true, both sides of this operator must be equal in order for the whole operation to be true. So this is when you have only two values. Now it might be the case where you have four values to make a comparison. So that's when you use the logical operators. So the logical operator separates two conditions. There'll be one condition on the right and one condition on the left. And the AND operator will be true only if both sides are true. All right, so let's write some code so we can better understand how this works. So this is the basic structure of a if-else statement. So on the top you have a condition, and if this condition is true, this part of the code gets executed, otherwise this part gets executed. So let's write a very simple one here. So int age equals, let's say 21. And the condition I'm gonna write here is if age is bigger than or equals to 21, then I'm gonna print here, welcome to the bar. Else, go home. So this is just a way to test if someone is legal age of drinking or not. So if I run this code, the person's welcome to the bar because the age is 21, and we're saying if it's bigger than or equals to 21. But if the person decides to be of age 20, then the program is going to say, hey, go home because you are underage for drinking. So this is the basic if-else statement. And you can put just about anything you want here on the condition to execute this thing. All right, so now let's take a look on the logical operators. So the logical operators are the AND, the OR, and the NOT, and so on. So for that, I'm going to create a second variable. I'm going to create a variable called Boolean is student, and I'm going to set this to true. So instead of being a bar, let's pretend they are movie theater discounts. So this code is to check if the people get discounts on the movie theater. So the first thing I'm going to do is check if the person is a student. So is a student equals to true, and age is bigger than 21, bigger than, let's say, bigger than 18. And if that's the case, then the person gets a 50% discount. Now, if the person is still a student, but the person is of age 10 and over, or over 10 in this case, then the person gets a, let's say, 75% discount. And then the last one here is going to be if the student and the age is less than or equal to 10, then a student and gets in for free. Now I'm going to continue here because these are the cases that the person is a student Oops, missing else here. And then I'm gonna put here else if the student is false and the age is bigger than 18. So if it's not a student and bigger than 18, you get no discount. And then finally, else if the person is not a student and the person is over, let's say, 10, then the person gets here a 25% discount. And then the last one, also if the person is not a student and the age is less or equals to 10, then this person is gonna get a 45% discount, let's say. So these are the conditions then for us to write with a logical operator. We're comparing two sides of the conditions. So let's run this program and see if we get the right discount. So in this case, the student is 20 years old, and 20 years old will be here because the person is a student and 20 years old, so we get 50% discount. So let's test it. If this person gets 50% discount, yep, correct. Now let's say the person is 12 years old and is a student. So 12 years old and a student would fall into this category, 75% discount. I want to run. Yep, I get the correct answer. Now let's say if the student is false. In this case here, it's not a student, but it's 12 years old. So it should fall in this category here. So not a student and bigger than 10 years old. So it should be 25% discount. If I run this, I do get a 25% discount. And then finally, let's say if the person is only 7 years old and not a student, so it'll be a 45% discount here. And I get a 45% discount. All right, so this is how you write a if-else statement with the logical operator. And here I have ands, but you could have or not, or whatever that is. All right, so let's take a look on this code now a little bit deeper to see if we can improve on this. This way here, it works, but it's a little bit rookie way to write the code. Not as far as formats, but as far as what we're putting over there. All right, so this thing here evaluates to true or false. And this thing here also evaluates to true or false. It has to. So if this is a Boolean and this is a Boolean, it will evaluate to Boolean. But if I remove this thing here, then this is already a Boolean and it's already evaluating to true or false. So you don't need the equals to false here or equals to true because it's already false or true. So this here will be either true or false. So we can save some time. And the same thing here, we can delete this, and delete this as well, and this one as well. So if you write code like that, it's gonna work just as fine. And why? Because this is a Boolean. Remember, you can only remove the equals if it's a Boolean. And since this is a Boolean, it works just fine. Now, after I remove everything here, this I'm evaluating to not a student. So because of that, I'm gonna put a not here. So not student, not student, and not student. So once I evaluate to not student, then you will give me the right answer. But this is to a Boolean. So I'm gonna run this program now. And I get 45% discount because the person is 7 years old and not a student. So 7 years old falls into this and not a student. All right, what else can we do here? So the next thing we can do, it can actually remove the not a student completely. And the reason you can remove the not a student completely is because if it's a student, it already fell into one of these three top categories, because these categories are for students. So you can actually remove the is students. So I'm going to remove the is student here as well. So I can remove that, and then this is going to work just as fine as well, even though I remove the Boolean. All right, can we simplify even further than this? Yes, we can. So the last evaluation here, for example, that's the last option. So we can even remove this thing here, and then we know for a fact that everything here will be 45% discount because that's the last category. So we can easily remove that, and this is still gonna work just as fine. 45% discount. All right, what else? Can we remove more things from this? Yes, we can. However, this is as far as I would go. I would not simplify even any further than this. However, you can, if you want to, remove the curly braces as well. And removing the curly braces on every single body here will work just as fine. As long as you only have one line of code per if-else statement, this will work. So you can simplify even further by doing this. I don't like doing the simplification. I like the curly braces to stay here. But that's optional. You can remove that and your code is going to work just as fine. All right, so this is how you do a series of if-else with the logic operator here. In other words, two conditions. All right, so the last thing I want to show you is the nested statements. So it's the nested if-else. So the nested if-else is when you have one if-else statement inside another if-else statement. So in order to do that, I'm going to create an if here. So if is a student, then I'm going to do something, and then else if not a student, then execute this code here. All right, so if a student, I can execute this code here, which is the student discount. So I'm going to put it right here. So I'm going to put the if-else inside the if-else. And I don't need the student anymore because I know that if this gets evaluated to true, then I know that inside this block of code, everything here inside is for students. So I can ignore this one as well. And this one as well. And then on the is not students, I can just copy this thing here and place right here inside. So the nested if-else is when you have a if-else statement inside a if statement. And you can put more here if you want. You can have one inside the other. So this is going to work just as fine. So the first evaluation is if it's a student. Then execute this code here, which is checking the age, and then you give the appropriate discount. And then else if it's not a student, evaluates the age again, it does the appropriate discount. So let's run this code. And then we get a 45% discount because the age is 7. And it is not a student, so you get into the age, into the 45% discount. Now, can we make this code a little shorter? Yes, we can. By doing what? By removing this thing right here. And the reason you can remove this thing is because the easy students only has two options. It's either true or false. So you only got the true option right here. And after that, it must be false. So you do not need to say false here. So you can ignore that, and that's going to work just as fine because of that. All right, anything else you can remove? Yes, we can also remove this guy here. Why is that? Because if it's either over 18 or over 10, then after that, it's everybody else. So you do not need to do any comparison here. It must be the student for free. And the same thing, oh, I already removed it here. So this is as simple as it gets. And you can, if you want to remove the curly braces, like I mentioned before, I don't like to do this. I would not write code without the curly braces for C#. All right, so let's change the input here just to see if we got a discount for something. So let's say 17, and the person is a student. So 17 and is a student should get a 75% discount. So there it is, we get the 75% discount. All right, so that's all for this video. Thanks for watching.